What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review the Season 1 finale of From on Epix. I guess it officially plays tonight around 9, but it's already available on Amazon, so I'm going to go ahead and do my review, and I'm going to do it in two parts. First part's going to be totally spoiler-free, more of like a Season 1 review to try to invite more people into watching the show. And then in the latter part of the video, I'll talk about some of the spoilers from the season finale and, feelings overall going into Season 2. But first and foremost, I need to apologize for my absence from this channel as of late. It's not because I haven't been cranking out content, but I've been working on a couple projects that are going to take just a lot longer to post because they involve a lot more editing. Last weekend shot hours of conversations with my friend Bill Scurry, which he's editing now, and I'm busy prepping for an upcoming shoot in Ireland in a week and a half, which should be very exciting. So once again, I've not been idle, but over the next week and a half or so before I go to Ireland, I'm looking forward to cranking out a lot more reviews. So let's get into From. Like I said, I'm going to open with some spoiler-free comments for those who have not yet seen it. If you're unfamiliar with the concept, From was created by writer John Griffin, who actually has a screenwriting credit on every single episode, either as a writer or as a co-writer. And it was produced by a bunch of people, including the Russo brothers, who obviously gave us 4 of the best Marvel movies. And speaking of producers, all the posters and trailers talk about how some of the producers involved with the show were involved with the show Lost about 15 years ago. And using that as a selling point can be a bit of a double-edged sword, because while Lost was this runaway sensation initially, the latter few seasons divided fans. Some people like myself got really frustrated and slowly but surely drifted away from the show, and other people regard it as one of the best shows of all time. But the reason I say it's a bit of a double-edged sword is because From and Lost share a lot of DNA in that it's a mix of science fiction, horror, a little bit of fantasy, and deals with a group of people who are trapped in a situation that defies all logic. Without giving anything away, you can see this in the trailer. You basically had this small town in the middle of nowhere, and everybody ends up there the same way by getting stuck on these roads that just keep bringing you back to the same small town over and over and over again. And this small town is suffering from this horrible affliction where once the sun goes down, these horrible monstrosities basically start to feed upon people unless you are safely tucked away indoors, protected by one of these talismans that basically allows the community to continue to survive. So while the nights are absolutely horrifying for the characters, during the day, all the characters try to go about living their lives. Some of them are always looking for ways to escape. Some of them are always looking for ways to better understand the situation they're in. And some people just spend their days drinking and screwing and so on and so forth. But the parallels to Lost don't end there, because they chose to cast Harold Perrineau as the star of the show. And he does an incredible job in the show. However, anytime you use one of the stars of Lost in a show that feels vaguely kind of sort of familiar or similar to Lost, inevitably people are going to be doing side-by-side comparisons about what works, what doesn't, and more importantly, whether or not this show might be falling into the same trap that I feel like Lost eventually fell into, where for every mystery introduced, instead of ever solving them, instead you just kind of snap and distract the audience. They look over here and introduce 4 new mysteries. And for some people, they don't mind being kind of led by the nose that way, because when we watch shows and movies, obviously to one degree or another, we're always signing up to be manipulated or hoping to be manipulated in a satisfying way. The question always is, though, do you have full trust in the writers to take you to some place that you want to go? And I would say, as far as From is concerned, the jury is still out on the front, but what From has to offer, something that very few shows do, and that is white-knuckle terror, at least for the first few episodes. I was very late to the game on the show. A lot of people have been recommending it on Twitter, and when I saw that the season finale was going to be released today, I was like, you know what? I'm going to get caught up on this sucker. And I basically binged the first 9 episodes in just a few sittings. And what kept me on the hook was the fact that in the first few episodes, there are a few scenes where I just screamed out loud like a little kid, where I was completely freaked out, getting goosebumps down my arms. Not only did the show give me some fantastic suspenseful sequences, it also gave us some legit gore. And I feel like, as far as TV is concerned, this is about as good and strong as horror tends to get. And I'll say this, for the rest of my life, anytime I hear any whispering or tapping outside a window, I'm going to shit my pants, because those scenes are incredibly effective. And one of the things that I love about the horror genre is that, like comedy, it's a very honest genre. You can listen to a crowd, you can stand outside of a comedy club, or you can stand outside of a movie theater where, again, a comedy or a horror movie is playing, and if you're hearing a vocal, spontaneous reaction from the audience, something's happening. If you're screaming or laughing with pleasure, well, then that kind of defies all critical analysis. I feel like a lot of times people doing movie commentary or TV commentary, they can kind of get lost up their own ass being overly analytical, and what they lose sight of is, are we having an engaging emotional experience? Are the writers basically picking us up and taking us on a journey, one that we want to keep coming back for? And so no matter what reservations I might have about how the first season has evolved or where the story might be headed, I don't take it lightly that this show on many occasions had me feeling legit heebie-jeebies up and down my spine. And I've seen a hell of a lot of really disturbing horror movies in my day. I mean, I've got a lot of emotional scar tissue on that front. So when something cuts through and I still get that like really vocal response, that's when I sit up and take notice and I'm impressed. So for all of you out there who are massive fans of From and have been banging the drum for it for the last 10 weeks, I get it. The show delivers. But where I might part ways with the more vocal fan base, I do have some legit critiques or criticisms of the structure of the show and how the genre of the show seems to be shifting as the story progresses, because the first few episodes were definitely dominated by that feeling of like doom and gloom and terror. And now it's starting to feel more like mystery box storytelling, science fiction. It's going for a very different vibe. And so while I'm very impressed by writer John Griffin and I have a lot of faith in him, my confidence has been shaken a little bit because I felt like by the time we got to the season finale, we basically left the horror genre behind, and we're starting to feel more and more like we're back in lost territory. And I shouldn't be judging this show based on my frustrations with another show, but it does have a lot of parallels and a lot of things in common. And one of the tropes that I absolutely can't stand in this show is just how often characters will walk up to another character and say, "Hey, I really need to talk to you. Can I have the room?" Blah, blah, blah. Like, has a good scene ever in the history of television followed the line, "I really need to talk to you"? But it's like on 2 or 3 occasions, every episode, someone's like, "I really need to talk to you." And what follows typically are these little, really syrupy, kind of melodramatic, sentimental bonding scenes. And like, without getting into specifics, if I've seen some horrible atrocity where people have been ripped limb from limb, I probably don't need to have like a bonding session with somebody. I would probably be more reacting like the sole survivor of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, sitting in the back of a pickup truck, laughing and shrieking and screaming hysterically. I would expect people to have like a 1,000-yard stare. I would expect people to be catatonic. I would expect people to be totally helpless. Because in this show, especially during the first few episodes, on any given day, people are getting murdered and torn apart left and right. But in the morning, people are serving breakfast and like raking leaves and like, opening mail. Man, I'm being a little sarcastic, but like they just go back to the routine very quickly. And you can say, oh, well, they're used to it at this point. Not all of them, but I feel like the horrors of what the characters experience don't necessarily translate to the way they respond, and so they all get kind of very blasé about it, which I found very surprising because the horror scenes are so devastatingly effective. But another trope that I dislike, which was often used in Lost, are the inspirational speeches where something horrible has happened and somebody has to basically stand up on a podium or rock or whatever and say something very sweet and positive and get everybody's spirits up. And these speeches ring so hollow. It's like they remind me of like, I don't know, like playing sports when you're 11 or 12 and you're like losing a soccer game like 10-1 at halftime and your coach tries to give you an inspirational speech. It's like, we're losing 10-1, let it go, like the game's over. But anyway, maybe I'm being too harsh, but those speeches just get a little tiresome, especially after you see them again and again. And once again, I was binging it, and so this formula, you start to notice a formula much more when you're watching episodes back to back without any space in between. And this last complaint's not a trope, nor is it from Lost, but this is just a complaint that comes from film and television in general. But one thing that I can't stand are, I guess, overly transparent attempts by writers to make kids seem precocious and wise and adorable all at once. And the kid in this show is just the absolute poster child for kids that I want to see get eviscerated by the bad guys. And that's going to sound so cruel. But I guess a more recent example would be something like Jurassic World, where you spend half the movie watching these 2 kids being chased by dinosaurs. And I thought they were such brats and they were so annoying. I was like, when are the dinosaurs going to eat these kids and make this my favorite dinosaur movie ever? Which of course did not happen. In this show, oh my God, this little kid where he's constantly talking about quests and he's got like inside knowledge and he's like, just always positive and just always saying things that are really, really cute. Anyway, I couldn't stand him, and I don't know if I'm going to be in the minority or the majority, but I think that kid is a major weak spot in the show. And if something, well, I guess this would be kind of like a mild spoiler talking about his fate. I won't say anything more about his fate until I get into my spoiler section. And because I'm eager to discuss some spoilers, let's go ahead and wrap up this section. Here's my official, reaction or review for From Season 1. Very strong start. Comes roaring out of the gate. Incredible premise, incredible tension, incredible style, suspense. I would say a really good ensemble cast. It's not great ensemble cast because some of the characters are annoying as hell, but some are incredible. So I would say a really solid ensemble cast, an awesome premise with some awesome scenes, and then a story that for me starts to not run out of gas by the end, but starts to shift into a different tone, a different style, one that I find to be less satisfying than the first half of the season. I'll be back on day 1 for season 2. I'll be very curious to see where it goes, but if it continues to introduce 4 new mysteries for every one that they have yet to solve, I will probably get frustrated at some point and hit the eject button. But I'm thrilled to see a brand new original concept thriving and finding a fan base. If you've been following this channel for a while, you know that I have a huge frustration right now with too many shows and movies based on pre-existing IP, where it's like, hey, this is something people recognize by name. Let's make a new, shittier version of it. This is, at a minimum, is a new concept. Some will say, oh, it's not that new. It's kind of like Lost. It's new. It takes its inspiration from Lost, but this is a brand new original horror concept. And I will always applaud people who not only come up with original ideas, but manage to deliver some legit scares along the way. So that's my official review. Now let's get into some spoilers, specifically from the season finale. So last warning, 3, 2, 1. So let me finish my thought from earlier about the kid. If the kid had been torn to pieces by the monsters in the first few episodes, I think it would have been emotionally devastating and made the parents much more interesting characters. They would have to wrestle with some real grief. The same way we see that Harold Perrineau and his son are wrestling with the killing of Boyd Stevens' wife, that gives that character such a sense of loss and tragedy and emotional stakes. And I think he's the best written character on the show. And one of the best written episodes of the show is when we see how he's becoming more of a leader and finding a sense of purpose as he's finding goats and finding the talismans and basically trying to figure out how to bring the community together to have something resembling a normal life, where we see that she is drifting further and further away, becoming more and more psychotic, and eventually goes on a shooting rampage. It reminded me a little bit of what we see happen in the movie Inception, where the wife thinks that she and Leonardo DiCaprio are still stuck in the dream state and that she needs to kill herself to snap them out. I don't know if that was on the writer's brains when they were writing that scene, but I thought that episode was incredibly effective. And it was a great backstory for the character. But just so I don't come off like a complete psycho, I'm not going to talk anymore about how I want that kid to be killed, because I know he never will be, but I just think it would have made the show better. And as a way of providing evidence for what I said, the opening of episode 1, when that little girl opens the window for the old lady, holy shit. I mean, the suspense leading up to that and that smile on the old woman's face, I'm getting goosebumps even talking about it. It was just pure magic. And not that I'm saying that that girl was like some annoying kid or anything like that, but it was just incredibly powerful. And I think anybody who likes horror, when they see that scene, they're like, whoa, this show's doing something special. And there's so many scenes like that scattered throughout the first few episodes. Like when we see the sight of the guy pinned under the rock down in the storm shelter or storm cellar, screaming. I mean, I leapt or leaped, jumped back from my screen, screaming in terror. That really put the zap on me. And I worry that these mysteries are just going to be kind of discarded or forgotten, or just never they won't pay any dividends, because the show keeps introducing new mysteries. We see how the sheriff and the psycho chick find that giant lighthouse out in the woods with the giant light. And that's interesting, and I'm eager to learn more. But that's not scary. That's like, we're drifting into more of like a sci-fi exploration concept, which just creates very different emotions in the viewer. Or at the very end when Tabitha falls through this giant crack beneath her home and finds Victor down there, when he says, this is where like the monsters sleep and this is where they draw their drawings. That scene should have been absolutely petrifying, but instead of being petrified, I was curious. I was like, oh, like what's going on? Are the monsters victims as well? Like what's going on here? And I just worry that the more exposition that we receive, the more those original emotions are going to deflate until it's just going to become quite a different show. But in terms of moments in this final episode where I still felt like it had that nice creepy vibe, when Jim is on the radio and he hears this guy on the other end say, your wife shouldn't be digging that hole, Jim, that gave me some chills. That gave me some heebie-jeebies. It was very ominous, very threatening. And another scene that gave me the heebie-jeebies is when Boyd is hearing a person calling for help. He runs up to that tree covered in spider webs and finds his wife, and she reaches out and grabs him. And then those spiders started crawling all over him. I didn't find the spiders all that scary because I don't really suffer from arachnophobia, but her voice calling for help and the way she reached out for him, I was like, God damn, that's creepy. Wasn't terrifying, but at least gave me some of those goosebumps that I hoped for from this show. But let's talk about some scenes that were less effective. So throughout this season, we've had this ongoing kind of will they or won't they scenario between Christy and Kenny. I believe that's the name of the two characters. Anyway, the doctor and kind of the sheriff in training. And they've had this, kind of cute romantic tension throughout where he's always kind of awkward and shy and she's always kind of too busy for love and romance. But we're kind of wondering, when or if they will ever get together. And in this episode, she breaks the news to him that she's engaged in the outside world. And I found this scene to ring a little hollow because maybe I would just react to death and trauma in a different way. But, it's very common during times of war and tragedy where people just start banging like crazy. I don't know if that's like a deep inner impulse where you just think, oh, well, we're facing an existential threat. It's time to make some babies, whatever the case may be. Or it's like, we might die tomorrow. Let's get our rocks off tonight. I'm sorry, but if I am trapped in a lost town in another universe, or wherever the hell this little town is located, and on a nightly basis, I'm being hunted by these scary fucking monsters, I don't care how wonderful the person the person is that I might be engaged to in the outside world, my sense of loyalty would probably start to get a little thin after a couple hours or a couple of days or a couple of weeks. But I don't know how long she's been trapped in this world, but I found it to be totally ridiculous that she would not succumb to the temptation of getting it on with this fellow who's clearly into her just out of some sense of loyalty to her fiancé in the outside world. So I found that scene to be ridiculous. Once again, I think the characters just aren't freaked out enough by what's been going on. The only person who seems properly freaked out enough is Victor, who's been there for a very long time. And so, yeah, I think everybody would act a lot more like Victor. And another small critique I have is that we should never have heard the voice of the little kid dressed in white. A mystery, if you want a mystery to be effective, it needs to remain kind of distant and indecipherable. And maybe just it hurt the scene because his voice was absurd. But when he starts telling the sheriff and the psycho chick that they need to hide, his voice was just terrible. And suddenly he goes from being this really fun, cool, mysterious ingredient to just yet another stupid kid on the show. And this is going to make me sound like I'm a total psycho, that like I hate all children. I love and adore kids. I come from this enormous family. I'm one of 9 kids. I've got a million siblings, a million nieces and nephews. I've got kids coming out of my ears. I adore them. However, annoying kids, in my family, if you're an annoying kid, you basically just get told to shut up and be seen, not heard. So that would be my advice to the writers of the show. When it comes to the little chubby kid in white, be seen, not heard. But getting back to some of the things that I thought worked well, the oncoming storm definitely gave the episode a sense of impending doom or a ticking clock. And obviously, once all the lamps start exploding and you get that weird voice on the other end, while the radio was successful, obviously nothing was solved. And then the episode ends with this really cool tune by Neil Young from 1969 from I think it was his debut album, Neil Young and Crazy Horse. But the song is Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere. Anyway, check out that album. It's got a bunch of killer tunes on it. And then we see this giant bus rolling into town. So there weren't a ton of central characters that died this season. I don't know how many new central characters will be introduced on that bus, but obviously the cast is about to get to a lot bigger, or at a minimum, help replace I guess maybe somewhere between around 20 people probably died in the early part of the season. I think 14 died of the night where the giant house got broken into. But that's another thing about this show that kind of reminds me of Lost, is how you're always got this revolving door of background actors who are just basically cannon fodder to be murdered and eviscerated anytime something horrible happens. And I guess they felt like they needed to introduce some fresh meat. So who knows, maybe the introduction of all those new people signifies the idea that the show will be pivoting back into some horror. That remains to be seen. As far as predictions go, because I'm very new to the show, I just started watching it a couple days ago. I haven't read any forums. I haven't gone to any chat rooms. I haven't read any threads on this. So as far as there could be legions of fans out there who have already picked the plot apart into a million little pieces and made all these predictions. I'm a total, complete blank slate. I don't have really anything to offer apart from the fact that I think this probably all started around the time of the Civil War. They found that bottle with the note 1864 written on it. And obviously there was that vision that I found to be terrifying with the first experiment with the radio where, what's the name of the tech guy? I absolutely love this dude. Jade, played by David Alpay. I think that's who the character is. Anyway, when he had that vision of that Civil War Union soldier coming after him, it was terrifying, but I have a feeling that's where all this shit really got started. But I really don't have any strong theories. But speaking of that character, I thought he had the funniest line of the entire season in this season finale episode where he said, "Anybody fucks this up spends a night in the box." But obviously we've seen what happens to people who spend a night in the box. And that was one of the biggest jolt scares of the entire season when all those arms came through and that guy got torn to pieces. But as somebody who's seen Cool Hand Luke a million times, I don't know if this was an overt nod to Cool Hand Luke or an accidental nod, but it's a nod all the same. But on the first night in jail in Cool Hand Luke, Carl, the floor walker, gives this long list of, rules. And anytime you break one of those rules, you spend the night in the box.
These here spoons you keep with you. Any man loses his spoon spends the night in the box. There's no playing grab ass or fighting in the building. You got a grudge against another man, you fight him Saturday afternoon. Any man playing grab ass or fighting in the building spends the night in the box.
It's in the box in Cool Hand Luke. It sucks, but you don't get torn to pieces. But for all you people out there who've not seen Cool Hand Luke, hunt it down. It's one of Paul Newman's best. And another line that I liked from this last episode is when Boyd and Sarah are talking about worms, and they're talking about if you chop them in half, they turn into two. And I don't know why I found this so funny, but he says, "Worms are fucking creepy. I'm sure it feels right at home here." And I was like, yes, a little gallows humor goes a long way. So I guess the season finale was fine, but I was really hoping for one scene that would be as terrifying as watching that dumbass in episode 7 letting the girl in through the window who ends up biting his tongue off. Like, that scene was just bone chilling. Or the scene out in the RV in the woods when you can hear people talking all around the whole night. Those scenes really fucked me up. So yeah, this season had so many astonishingly good scenes. So if I sound like I'm being overly harsh, it's only because I worry that season 2 won't be scary at all. And who knows, maybe it'll evolve into something that's equally satisfying in a different way. But I'm a horror buff. I'm a horror junkie. So I want more scenes like watching Kill the Boy appearing on that girl's arm and like black veins. Like, that stuff is creepy as shit. And that's the stuff that really got me into the show. And so you kind of got to dance with the girl that you brought to the prom. And at any rate, I'm rambling at this point. It's all a long-winded way of saying that I think everybody should have a look at the show. And by episode 3 or 4, people will have a pretty good idea of whether or not they want to stick with it. At a minimum, the first episode is so damn good, you're going to get an hour of really good entertainment. So I think this show is good. I'm probably not on the same page as the people out there who are saying it's like the best show on TV right now. I think that's a bit of a stretch. I think something like Succession is better, or Euphoria is better, or Better Call Saul. I think, but to each their own. We have more shows are being made these days than ever before. So there's a show out there for everybody. And I'm sure there are a lot of people who feel like From is being made just for them. So that's all I've got to say for now. I'll definitely be back for season 2 next year. And thank you to all the people out there on Twitter who kept reminding me saying, you need to check out From, you need to check out From. So am I the only one who thinks From is a terrible name for a show? If you even try to look up From, the name, Google doesn't quite know how to figure out From. I would always have to write Epix, comma, like From season 1, then it would understood, but it's kind of a weird, ambiguous title that I don't think it does any favors to the show and people discovering it, but that's, once again, I'm rambling. I'm going to wrap the sucker up. Hope everybody enjoyed the season finale, and hope everybody enjoyed this review. If so, please remember to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell. You know the drill, and hope everyone has a great week. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.